So, Boris Bartin, and welcome. It is my pleasure to welcome you at the second keynote of the 2021 CF Congress. And I have the privilege to be chair and warmly welcome our keynote speaker, Sanna Valkonen. My name is Kope Dikok. I am Professor of European Ethnology at the University of Helsinki. And with me today, I have my colleague Pirjo Kristina Virtanen, and together we will moderate the session.
Hello everyone, puore päivi pohkaite. I would also like to welcome you all to this keynote. I'm Associate Professor in Indigenous Studies at the University of Helsinki, and I have had the great pleasure to collaborate with Sanna Valkonen for some past years. And I'm very glad that she's here today with us to present her research with Sami artists and craft makers and the synergy of knowledges that she has created. Sami studies exists here at the University of Helsinki, at the University of Oulu and University of Lapland, besides the northern universities of Sweden and Norway. In Norway and Finland also exists global indigenous studies. It can be said that Sami studies has broke the rules already for decades.
Thank you, Pirjo. So now let me introduce you briefly, our keynote speaker. Sanna Valkonen is Professor of Sami Research at University of Lapland in Rovaniemi. She has a doctoral degree in social sciences from University of Lapland from 2009. And her research deals with Sami cultural heritage, representations of Sami culture, especially in relation to heritage institutions such as museums. She has researched and published about the dynamics of self-representation and politics of indigeneity. Her work discusses and emphasizes Sami knowledge, how it is performed, transmitted, and communicated. And her research also addresses issues related to knowledge production, questioning and challenging traditional scientific communication, and proposing ways to better include Sami voices and knowledge in research, proposing a cultural and socially sustainable Sami research. And I also want to remind everyone that the seminar is recorded. But now, Sanna, we're very glad that you accepted our invitation to be a keynote speaker, and we acknowledge the importance of the presence of Sami research at the CF Congress. So we can now look forward to yet another inspirational talk. Sanna, Boris Bartin, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Dear audience and the organizers of the CF conference, I am very pleased to be here and give this speech today. Warm thanks for inviting me. Particularly happy I am for being able to present Sami research in this particular occasion. I am currently in Rovaniemi in the Arctic Circle at the University of Lapland, which is my home university. Originally, I am from the border zone of the Sami homeland, from Muonio village, and I am of Sami and Finnish origin. The Sami are an indigenous people who live in the area of 4 nation states. The Sami lands span from central Norway and Sweden across northern Finland to the Kola Peninsula in Russia. The Sami call this area Sapmi. The Sami have their or our own structures and institutions of society, customary ways of land use, and own particular cultural and societal life, including own languages, political traditions, and cultural habits. In this picture is my grandmother milking a reindeer. I will start by a song that we can listen now.
Koito hielo, suokumi tähti, suokumi sielu, räntemi meri, varjeli pienoja Päästiin kuotista juhkimin tiedoin mälestettiin manjastemiin. Siivo hässiin pola hemin. Asso kättis muista lemin. Luulin ratjut muista semin. Anni hävirä virrasis kulkiin siittäin pissalin sierasin huumatin hain muin säsi ja jennämin piuto lihkui seittiin hierramin mahla pai huossai. Iai baby manu jäi. Kiinai kesi chapsai täpit masuin turvat naftat. Maailmanski leitsaamme alusuailun kovin kuorisään. Westmuts kohti raskoot. Siitä tötterittä tävistään. Ainu siitä tuolstolsiin. Tuailun kovin kuorisään. Kaikki teksin viit. Kielihoikotilis hävistään. Maailmanski leitsaamme alusuailun kovin kuorisään. Westmuts kohti raskoot. Siitä tötterittä tävistään. Ainu siitä tuolstolsiin. Tuailun kovin kuorisään. Kaikki teksin viit. Kielihoikotilis hävistään. Vaikka massa lopsi. Äikihan iäkä napsi. Vai astasi poikasi kakakalla ja maossamme pekemmin shotsi. Täällä olu häki, tähki, kohta, sahtu, säki, vejoks, katju, hiekka, letsas, varmata, kvähki. Kannamme tietoskin peikit, et hapafai sähti, kosa, virti, kosa, puuti, kopas, osti, kopas, kirsi, kopas. Mutona polta noukkapäät, lampu, väkimin, säkimin, tuomui, puktimin, jaamu, huksemi, vuotui, falleihin, päiviin, falleihin, saamus, puktimin, jaamu, näin, asa, lava, mihin, pasa, kolla, sai, lava, siempäs, kaikki, särkä. Etsivään tuhtiin, motalana vätti, suäni, hahtami tehti perlunttumino ei viitä, ei saamehin suehta inti vittaatte, ja hartti pyrä vittaatte, ko aina toimi, vuhkilla massahin vältti pähkälä sittaatte, aamulla miskot tuessa, naisari hoftas törrä, piirut tuessa, jäljellä päällessä tähän vasta, syökki, hatsa, kueski, minäsi mierriä luettu, minäsi jo mierritä vuosu, insami mähtitä kovuja meredi hikillä luottu vuotus.
Okay, so these lyrics that we just heard in North Sami are from a Sami rap artist Ailu Valle's song Viiton Seittiht, Widened Sacred Rocks. In my view, these words of the words of the first verse depict perceptively the interrelatedness of the human and the environment in the Sami way of life and Sami worldview in a traditional reindeer herding society. Nature is not something to be captured or conquered, something separate from the cycles of everyday life. But all human action is entwined with the environment, with animals, earth, air, water, weather, sacred sites, cycles of the year. When we look at the following verses of this song, the picture becomes more complex. In the second and third verses, the lyrics grow to be an analysis of a contemporary Sami society and the challenges it faces, the Sami face. There are various land use projects heading to the Sami homelands in the name of development. Life in general is more and more dependent on the technique and mining industry. Growing consuming is a fact. Restrictions, regulations, laws, poisons, pollution, they determine. But the lyrics offer also solution. But we have the power if we dare, because our things are governed by nature. Our things are governed by the reindeer. We ourselves know how to determine these lands, not the one who is separated from nature. Ailu Valle himself writes how this song is about the challenges of living in the world today as Sami, the struggle of sustaining the traditional culture in a rapidly changing world. Valle tells how the name of the song, Viiton Seittiht, Wide and Sacred Rocks, refers to the present-day situation where the Sami are part of the global culture, but at the same time still have a strong bond to the traditional way of life. He writes how sacred rocks have had an important role in Sami culture in places of worship. They demonstrate the locality of the culture. In other words, how the Sami have been strongly connected to local nature. But nowadays, as Ailo Valle notes, we are also connected to worldwide natures through the parts of the technological devices we use, whether we want it or not. I have been chosen these lyrics of Ailo Valle to be an introduction to the theme of my speech today, discussing how the customary Sami ways of knowing and Sami knowledge can and should be weaved into the practices of Sami research. The Sami worldview is said to be ontologically particular. There is no clear boundary between human and the environment. Other than humans are important knowing and acting subjects. As Ailo Valle portrays, the Sami knowledge and ways of knowing the world are based on experience and concrete acting. Knowing and knowledge are jointly created and shared in everyday activities in communicating and acting, being in dialogue with the environment, caring it, telling stories about it, asking luck, humbling and being patient, engaging with the principle that a human is not a master of nature, but the knowing subjectivity is co-constituted. It happens together with the surrounding environments and its subjectivities and agencies. A reindeer herder knows together with the reindeer, together with the fell, with the snowmobile, and so on. The purpose of this kind of knowledge is to take care that living is possible also hereafter. It is not knowing because of the knowledge itself. In my speech, my aim is to ponder what the above described practices of knowing could mean in terms of research, how to explore Sami society and address the multifaceted and complex challenges it faces, at the same time taking seriously the Sami understanding of the world and its ontological premises. Having the Sami worldview and the ways of knowing at the core of the scrutiny. I will discuss these questions by presenting two, or actually three, research projects which are in many ways particular in the social scientific academic world. They combine Sami social scientific research, art, traditional and everyday knowledge and skills, and they aim at carrying out Sami practices and methods of knowing together in several ways. I will suggest that as in the Sami world, the boundaries between creatures and phenomena are fluid. Also, the Sami research must be able to act and know within different boundaries, crossing them and breaking them. Ailo Valle is a Sami rap artist who produced the cited rap song and an album, Viiton Seittiht, in the project Viiton Seittiht, the new dimensions of the Sami nature relationships, funded by the Kone Foundation. This project, combining Sami research and art, examined global transborder connections and responsibilities of the local Sami nature relations. The members of the project were Stina Aletta-Aikio, Maria Helander, Ailo Valle, Jarno Valkonen, and myself. I will now tell a story how this project was born. There was an Irish diamond mine company having plans to come to the Sami homeland, to Otsejohka, Utsjoki region. Many local people were afraid how the possible mine would affect fishing and reindeer herding. It would perhaps destroy possibilities to practice traditional nature-based livelihoods for many generations. It is evident that the existence of Sami culture and society depends strongly on clean environment and land areas that are wide enough to practice reindeer herding and other nature-based livelihoods, which also maintain many particular skills and knowledge, as well as rich languages. The relation to nearby environment is the foundational basis of the Sami society. Large-scale projects coming from outside would affect the Sami culture and its vital conditions. A little after the news of the diamond mine, a Sami visual artist, Maria Helander, gave an interview in the Sami radio, Yle Sapmi, related to her exhibition portraying mining landscapes. Here is an extract from that interview. Only when I started to study these things, I realized that we all Sami as well, are married with mining industry. Maria Helander is noting that she can't preach against mining because she can't live without day-to-day industrial products that are connected to mining industry. Through her pictures, she can only address where we are going. It has been hard to accept this, especially as a Sami and as a representative of an indigenous people. Indigenous peoples are often perceived as mobiles, telephones, mobile phones, all games and tricks. Helander is reminding that almost everything is based on the products of mining industry. She continues that this does not always come into mind. Somehow we might not think about this, and neither did I, that actually this Western way of consuming is pretty much based on the products of mining industry. Maria Helander questioned her right as a Sami to prioritize the lands and environment of her own people at the cost of other people's. She questioned such an indigenous agency and responsibility where our own ancestral lands are at the core of everything. Viiton Seittiht, initiated by the unpleasant awareness or feeling of hypocrisy related to the fact that while protecting our own nearby environment, of the Sami from mining industry or other large-scale projects affecting environment, we often carelessly consume commodities dependent on raw materials extracted from the nearby environment of other people. Perhaps people who do not have any possibilities to resist the exploitation of their home environment. The persons who got involved to the project had similar thoughts and feelings. We started to wonder the primality of our lands and our privilege to be able to defend our lands. The motivation behind the project was to reflect our responsibilities towards distant natures, the nearby environments of faraway peoples. The ambitious goal of Viiton Seittiht was to rediscover nature behind the planetary threat scenarios by means of Sami research and art. We sought new forms of Sami nature consciousness and sensitivity towards nearby and distant natures, as well as new perspectives on the material relations of communities. We talked about scaling the nature relations, searching for the relations and scales between different things and phenomena and making them visible. Our aim was to critically discuss the uncertainty and blurriness related to our nature relations and make visible this blurriness and uncertainty. So if we think about kuksa, a wooden cup, we basically know how is it connected to nature. The motif of a wooden cup is natural material from birch burr, from which the crafter will work a practical object, and it is valued and tested in use, and this is done using the skills that has been learned inside the culture. The contemporary practices of human subsistence are more complicated than in a wooden cup because they are separated and tiered away from the direct environments where people are living. That is why day-to-day life's nature-cultural coexistence is harder to understand and perceive. The nature relation of a porcelain cup, not to mention a mobile phone, is not at all as clear as the one of a wooden cup. So how a similar kind of understanding of the interrelatedness of all human action and the environment, characteristics to the traditional Sami way of life, as figured in Ailo Valle's song's first verse, or in a wooden cup, could be extended to modern lifestyle and to faraway natures. How to make the material relationality of our life visible and understandable. All this was explored by means of Sami audiovisual environmental art, Sami photography and filmmaking, Sami rap music, and combining the insights of the artists and artistic work to the academic discussions. The outcomes of the projects were in several forms. They were an exhibition including several artworks that were on display in the Sami Museum Sida from September 2018 to March 2019. And some of the artworks have been on display also elsewhere, for instance in Mänttä art festivals. A short film, Ätnan vulos lottiht, Birds in the Earth by Maria Helander. A rap album in North Sami, Viiton seittiht, by Ailo Valle. And a book entitled Viiton seittiht, published both in Finnish and in North Sami in 2018. So we aimed at creating alternative forms of knowledge, different from conventional academic practice in social sciences, and alternative ways to disseminate knowledge and provoke thoughts. We told stories in different forms about Sami relation to nature and its multiple connections, as is the customary Sami method of knowing, in which knowledge production is understood as narrative and dialogical by nature and with nature, as discussed by, for instance, Elina Helander-Renvall and Kaarina Kailo. The rap album of Ailo Valle manifests this method and goal. It is a thorough analysis of the intertwining of the human and the environment in the past and present in a form of a particular storytelling. Or Maria Helander's artworks manifest this. Maria tells, for several years, I have been taking photographs in Sápmi, in the northern Fennoscandian region, exploring the link between the mining industry and today's standard of living and culture of consumption, and in particular, the impact of mining on the sensitive northern nature. The nickel mined in the Kola Peninsula is needed, for example, for the manufacture of stainless steel, computer, hard drives, and mobile phone batteries. Again, the apatite mined in the Kibini Mountains is processed further to produce phosphate fertilizers for farming needs. In my work, I emphasize the dependence between people and nature. In addition to landscapes, Maria continues, I present a human who takes the form of an animal, thus identifying with old Sami beliefs and myths. I want to highlight the corporeality of people and how humans are just one animal species among many, dependent on nature, ecosystems, and land. We are part of the cyclicity of nature, a pile of particles and molecules. Stina Aletta Aikio tells about her artwork, Weeping Pine. Cherus Petähti enters into dialogue with nature's own ways of communicating, speech of plants and human intervention, mining activities, industry, and consumption. The work envisions how the impact of consumer culture could be concretized in nature. So we told stories on Sami relationships to the environment, at the same time discussing and bringing forth Sami heritage. During the process and afterwards, it became clear that conventional academic forms of producing and disseminating knowledge may not be enough to address and explore such ethically complex issues as the above described. This seems to be the case in the research of Sami cultural heritage as well. How to approach and examine something that is at the same time historical, written and unwritten, oral and tacit. It is everyday life and law and politics, something that is enacted by various legal and political discourses and conventions, by silent conventions. It is embodied being and knowing. It is feelings, artifacts, memories, knowledge and skills connected to artifacts. It is assembling futures and much more. In order to open this complexity or blurriness, I will tell you a story from one particular conference titled Indigeneity the Museum that was held in the Sami Museum Sida in Inari in the Sami homeland in August 2018. There were many wonderful presentations in the conference discussing indigenous museum and cultural heritage from different angles. The international law and practices and conventions protecting indigenous cultural heritage were thoroughly discussed by the representatives of the UN and UNESCO. There were presentations about the Sami music tradition, about the repatriation of the Sami collections of the museums, and about many other important topical issues. Moreover, the new manuscript for the museum's new main exhibition, prepared by Professor Veli-Pekka Lehtola, was presented in the conference. The one with the name Ename Lami Parnah. These lands are our children. One invited speaker, a Sami researcher and tuojar, crafter, Sikka-Maria Makka, talked in her presentation in that conference how she had sewed kakti, a Sami dress, to her son, together with her sister, who also had sewed kakti to her son. While sewing, Sikka-Maria and her sister had at the same time discussed different aspects of kakti, its details and their meanings, traditions and colors of different families, its previous and contemporary use, the unwritten norms and rules related to wearing kakti, and also care and love inscribed in kakti and making and using kaktis. The speech was touching, maybe because it discussed something at the same time very mundane, everyday life thing, but also something that many of us may have lost. The speech discussed care, sharing, family relations, transmitting indigenous traditions, keeping them alive and flourishing while describing detailed techniques, knowledge and skills of preparing and using a Sami dress. Many people in the audience were moved. Many told later how tears came into their eyes when listening to the speech. The venue of the conference was a museum, a place to collect and preserve cultural heritage and to interpret past in present to future. An institution which chooses what heritage is valuable enough to be conserved and kept and put in an exhibition or museum collection. Indigenous peoples and museums have complex relations, and the history and present day of othering of indigenous peoples is still often present in the museums, as we all well know. This particular museum, the Sami Museum Sida, is an exception in a museum field because it is founded and led by the Sami themselves. During the speech of Sikka-Maria Makka, I started to think the concept of cultural heritage and the reality it denotes in a new light. The conference offered interesting perspectives and understandings of cultural heritage. Basically, everyone was discussing, in principle, the same thing, but through very different frameworks, discourses, and understandings. Or were they even discussing the same thing or same realities? The presenters knew their topics very differently. In Sikka-Maria's presentation were present many kinds of realities and knowledges. There were experimental knowledge as a tuojar, the skill to be concretely able to make the dress. There was caring knowledge, the affection and will to make such a kakti that is perfect to a son, a kakti that has everything correct in this cultural and societal context, and for the particular use it is done. There were inherited and learned knowledge about the overgenerational meanings of kakti. And there was knowledge of a researcher, a perception of how this whole process can be analyzed and theorized. Making a kakti is an interesting, or maybe even perfect, example of Sami knowledge. Knowledge and knowing are not separate part of Sami being, but an integral part of living and acting as Sami. Knowledge is caring. Gunvor Guttorm, Sami Tuotji researcher, makes a distinction between the Sami concepts of knowing something and knowing about something. According to Guttorm, tiehtiht express theoretical knowledge, that is knowledge of an action, whereas mahtiht relates to practical bodily knowledge, a skill to be able to carry out certain work. Guttorm gives an example of kietka, Sami cradle. Someone may know, tiehtiht, how to make kietka without having made one him or herself. When she or he actually makes a kietka, she or he gains hands-on personal experience, knowledge through action. This goes with kakti as well. I can know in theory how to make a kakti. I can also know what are the particular colors and patterns of my kin. But I don't have the personal experience in preparing one. I don't have the skills, the touch that is possible to gain only in making and knowing in making. What was exceptional in Sikka-Maria Makka's speech, rather new in the Sami context, was that a researcher opens her own heritage in her academic work. For instance, in terms of Tuotji, there are now educated Sami women who can analyze and give words to something that has been silent, tacit knowledge. There are risks, as Sikka-Maria Makka has pointed out. Not all knowledge is meant to be told, but there is also the risk that without wording this knowledge, it can remain silent and hidden ever after. Therefore, tiehtiht and mahtiht are in a dynamic relation to each other in the sense of research as well. A researcher takes risks when wording and interpreting Sami heritage and is all the time aware about the possible consequences of her work. It is, however, important to say out loud the tacit knowledge as it makes these Sami realities visible and strengthens the relation of the Sami to their heritage. This conference crystallized for me how cultural heritage contains or is about various practices and ways of being. Or actually, how cultural heritage comes into being, is actualized in various practices, like in Tuotji, Sami handicraft tradition, or in the museum, in its conservation and curating practices, and displaying practices. A Sami handicraft tool in a glass vitrine in a museum is something very different than a handicraft tool at hands of mother teaching her child how to use it. Even these both practices, museum and Tuotji, are about transmitting culture. And when making a Sami handicraft, for instance, sewing a kakti, Sami dress, it is also conserving and curating, as well as defining, interpreting, and creating cultural heritage. I can give you an example by telling a story about Nyuihkun, a hedel. A Sami woman in old age saves in her wardrobe, inside a pillowcase, her grandmother's Nyuihkun, hedel. This Nyuihkun is made of reindeer antler and it originates from 18th century. In this woman's Sami family, this Nyuihkun has been an important handicraft tool for preparing laces for shoes and bands needed in everyday life. The fact that this Sami woman saves the hedel, Nyuihkun, in her wardrobe inside a pillowcase indicates that this handicraft tool is no longer in regular use. But it is, however, considered as a very valuable piece of bone, something that cannot be put in a bookshelf or in kisa, in a craft box, but inside soft clothes. This hedel, Nyuihkun, is embedded with family stories, skills, and handicraft tradition. Its owner, this Sami woman, has weaved with it laces and pants to her family according to the models of her family and home region, as have her mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother done before her. The Hedel embodies cross-generational skills, relations, and care, as well as the awareness of the family history. Recently, this woman had started to ponder that because of the rare use of Nuihkun, it could be donated to the Sami Museum. She, however, hesitates giving it away for several reasons. Perhaps grandchildren will learn this exact skill, and this family treasure comes to use again, and this particular Sami tradition could continue in the family. Because in the museum, this utensil would become an object without practical purpose, a cold object without human touch. In the museum, the Hedel, Nuihkun, would become part of the museum's Sami collection and as an object of its curatorial practices and conservation methods. When on display, this handicraft tool of one family would play a role in a larger narrative of the history and culture of the indigenous Sami people. Nuihkun would transform from a personal utensil and aspect of a family heritage to Sami people's common and public cultural heritage. The story about Nuihkun is a theme for the projects Loki and Arpi, the ontological politics of Sami cultural heritage, funded by the Academy of Finland and Kone Foundation. Making a kakti as creating cultural heritage by combining different knowledges and skills functions as an epistemic framework of making research on Sami cultural heritage. The research group of these projects forms a collective of Sami researchers and artists, many of whom are at the same time traditional skill holders, tuojars, reindeer herders, activists, and much more. The members are Aile Aikio, Saara Alakorva, Stina Aletta-Aikio, Sikka-Maria Makka, Ailu Valle, Mikkal Morottaja, Aka Amok, Maria Helander, Veli-Pekka Lehtola, and myself. The aim is to examine how Sami cultural heritage exists in society. How is it assembled in different practices, and how in these practices are realities and futures of Sami communities assembled and envisioned? Through what kinds of practices, culture or heritage becomes cultural heritage? The method is combining tiehtiist and mahtiist. We prepare, craft, sew, interpret, reword, analyze, write, portray, and much more. In different forms, our intellectual and societal traditions, our heritage. By making cartographies of the past, present, and future cultural heritage, we discuss the contemporary challenges the Sami society faces. We explore and care how the Sami society can exist also in the future. I will give you now an example how different forms of knowledge are present in our processes in particular ways. This is a WhatsApp conversation of our research group. The topic was using bones in the artworks in process. As mentioned with the example of a Hedel, reindeer bone or antler has been and still is an important material for Sami utensils. As you can see, there are expertise on bones in the group. Some are used to handle and process them as part of their reindeer herding livelihood. Some as part of their artistic working, or as crafters, or as conservation professionals. This WhatsApp conversation of one evening became finally a wider discussion of the materiality in the Sami culture. An artist presented that the artwork could include bones of cows to represent the material realities of the Sami modernities. This provoked many thoughts. Someone said that the thought of having cow bones as a material for a Sami artwork is difficult. Perhaps only reindeer or moose bones could represent Saminess. So we started to discuss also which bones and more so animals can stand for Sami culture. And what about the past times when reindeer were not tamed yet, when there were only deer? So this particular conversation is an example how animals and other entities come and are part of our research and artistic processes, and how they exist, act in the practices of knowing and in the knowledge production processes. This discussion continues in many forms within our research collective. Sami research is a multi- and cross-disciplinary critical science that examines Sami society and culture in terms of people's own cultural and societal standpoints. Sami research draws from indigenous research paradigms and methods in combination with research traditions and methodologies of particularly social sciences, humanities, and legal studies. However, importantly, also building on the Sami epistemologies and practices of being and acting. An objective of Sami research is to construct Sami self-determination, and it ideally rises from the needs of Sami society. The chorus of Viiton Seittiht quotes the famous thought of Ole Henrik Makka, that the Sami were the last who were on skis and the first who started working with snowmobiles. This kind of flexibility and ability to adapt or take influences from other epistemic cultures without losing own foundations is important to the Sami research as well. In this speech, I have opened alternative Sami-based ways to make research on Sami culture and society and its manifold relations. I have illustrated how the categorizations and hierarchic positionings of a researcher, artist, and traditional skill holder are fluid and shifting, as well as our research and art. I have tried to point out how, in order to carry out profound analysis and to gain profound knowledge, it is essential to transgress academic conventions and established practices of science, and to recognize and make use of and valid various expertises and knowledges in the research routine. So there were once an interview on the radio, pretty radical one. It launched a series of knowledge productions with beautiful outcomes. Sometimes the rules must be broken, sometimes must dare to say out loud unpleasant things, to act as an agent of change. This is an important goal for the Sami research as well. For the end of this speech, I want to show a music video done in Loki and Arpi collaboration from Ailu, Valle and Amok, who are members of our research collective. In their dialogue in North Sami and Anar Sami, that is a highly endangered language with about 600 speakers, they follow Sami oral traditions and tell old Sami stories with new words. Here is an interpretation of Horakallis, Tiermes, who is the Sami god of thunder and rain. Ollu kiihto puohkaitte. Kiitos. Many thanks for your attention.
We will have a YouTube video by Ailu, Valle and Amok. Just a minute.
Я ж на итле супа rajani alatason. Puhui uainuson, voi kalitipa toroson. Mut spolloloi älkom, roololoi valtum. Voiko olmo sunte ilma saltaakin kaunum. Taha hiejupu jollon koto. Vuorta mun saa läänut ollonko soosti ja to. Suukotjoti täsmin ja taitorin. Voiko sun altereko työhin chaitolli. Älkeli lommon roolo työhin. Siski pelees pollot pyöllid. Mut vuolta mun sunohä kuulotko. Piru huaivistain jätkis tuulon. Voiko sun loi härjänno ohtuuni selli. Sun i perti et ohtuu sun i pierki. Voit sahe ohtuuni sollu poltun salteet. Puolu haavi uto ja kuittok varte. Oltako soski tai hora källi. Vaikku voinit on vaikka nuuroi. Suoja temmin huolos välliora. Lihotun näytimassa pellit puuroi. Väruttu sali kalloi puelli pora. Näinkin miet rauhutin piekkos pääli. Jako pälli sääni optis nora. Tulee korosikos tääli. Helvet olas puelli suhkes tuhkos kiekka kuhkää. Juhkon voimin juhkon saada lähtäs tohkä tuhkää. Tussissa sihtikos liihtös liihtan huopan suhkää. Kuunai koottitan hiura vaas kiihtikko jonu kuhkää. Suopaa suoltää siskeltäsän suotan. Ja teette mättu vuodas vielä kielai uoppatan. Muihko juihko maina sijon täytä kurus kuoppa. Ja äskä podcast korkan kitta pitchen chattelu sai luopaa. Weste kiva mahla uoppahan. Jännekko äkki sillien koske taas miiton tuotasla. Muhta jos mento arra mento lahka tuohta vuoda tuottada. Tolla njöksä mitä et suotna mitä pata suortmaida. Optio uola luoppatin. Talle oinen nokta nava puohtala sai puohtala. Jätmimä suopama sai nuopana. Te mulla nemesken champata manja sähtä muolu johti suopadi. No tuohta vuoda nuotat sahkehin suojaivi. Oltako soski tai hora källi. Vaikku voinit on vaikka nuuroi. Suoja temmin huolos välliora. Lihotun näytimassa pellit puuroi. Väruttu sali kalloi puelli pora. Näinkin miet rauhutin piekkos pääli. Jako pälli sääni optis nora. Varmun satoi tulee korosikos tääli. Oltako soski tai hora källi. Vaikku voinit on vaikka nuuroi. Suoja temmin huolos välliora. Lihotun näytimassa pellit puuroi. Väruttu sali kalloi puelli pora. Näinkin miet rauhutin piekkos pääli. Jako pälli sääni optis nora. Varmun satoi tulee korosikos tääli.
Läpi koitna mun sormas.
Ollut kiihtu, Sanna. Thank you so much for sharing your work and the pieces of art with us. We just experienced the entanglements of the environment, technologies, and humans. We know that it was thundering in Rovaniemi, and there were some delays in the presentation, but that's okay. There is a comment already in the chat. There's a Katriina Siivonen who says, "Thank you. A very important lecture. It's truly valuable to learn about Sami self-reflection, about consuming society, and about their own many-sided heritage." That's a comment, but if I make the first question to heat up the Q&A, I would like to also comment that it was beautiful how you showed how your project speaks to the Sami researchers and Sami artists themselves. I would like to ask, how do you see the difference of disseminating your research results to larger audiences? How do the research results have a different impact if they are in the form of artworks or in written scientific texts? For instance, if you want to have an impact on those deciding on extractive industries.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have to first say that it's interesting how if we invited Horakallis here, as there was this thunder and lightning and lights were switching down and connections were breaking down. Yes, but about this question, I believe that artistic expressions can indeed communicate issues, important issues and challenges the Sami society face for many kinds of audiences and also to decision makers. So if we, for instance, think of Ailu Valle's music, and he discusses in his lyrics kind of topics like climate change, consumption culture, extractivism, Sami self-determination, has kind of self-criticism written in the lyrics. So very topical, important issues. And he translates his lyrics also to English and to Finnish, as well as opens and widens these topics in, for instance, in social media and in many kinds of occasions and elsewhere too. And all this is very much based also on academic discussions and on very thorough knowledge and commitment from his side. So I think that such people that this kind of knowledge do not reach through other channels, like people who do not read scientific articles, also within Sami community. So this can really awake to see that how there exist discriminating power structures in many forms. And I would like to mention also, because this is of course not the only project that is combining art and science, but there are many others as well within the Sami research. And there have been, like perhaps many of you know, Suvi West's film Eatna Meemet, how she discusses very important issues in her documentary films and how they raise awareness very much and raise discussions, open the eyes of many. And also like Paulina Feodorov's Atonement, what is the word in English? I don't remember the name in English, but this Sopu project, which has kind of been able to show how there are epistemic injustices in decision making and in knowledge production processes, how the Sami knowledge may not be seen as valid knowledge, or there is a total lack of knowledge. So I think that combining art and science can really crystallize and concretize important points in a way that they may become clearer, more understandable.
Thank you, Sanna. And so I invite the attendees to use the Q&A box if you want to ask a question or just give a comment to Sanna and her presentation. Since I'm a chair, I will have this possibility to ask a question myself. And yeah, thank you for this very inspirational talk and for sharing your work. What I wanted to ask that you're presenting alternative ways to disseminate knowledge. And I wonder about the reception and impacts that you've seen. What reactions have you received, both from academia and from communities or community members? Could you say a few words about that?
Thank you. Yes, I think there have been very positive reception, and I know that there have been discussions, for instance, in social media, how for example, the cup installation that was shown in one slideshow, how it has really awaked people to realize these material connections that our life have and how they are often very hidden. And I don't know, I have this feeling that this kind of community-based research, as I consider these projects, it is mostly kind of perceived positively. And yes, and I think it is also very important to have this kind of collaborative collectives, research teams combining different kinds of peoples from different kinds of knowledge traditions, because I think it is important to have create such an atmosphere, have a kind of a group that it is very easy to discuss also the critical issues and kind of openly try to discuss also that kind of issues that are not possible to discuss publicly, and that may also contribute to our thinking and the way how we can deal with this question in the artistic processes and also in research, what we can write, how we can write, and we can all this. It is possible to kind of have feedback from the close research team. I would like to, if it's possible, it would be wonderful to hear also insights from the audience, that what kinds of thoughts this may have.
And we have a few questions in the chat and the Q&A already. I see we have only a few minutes, but we'll try to have time for these questions. So Molly Andrews writes, "Thank you for such a rich and multi-layered talk. You have given us so much to think about. You referred to the difference between knowing something and knowing about something. Could you say something about how you view your role in this regard?"
My own role. I think it is very much intertwined also with this whole process, how my own actual research. I am not tuojar or reindeer herder personally, so I don't have that kind of human kind of touch to tangible project going on that I am analyzing. But I think it is also a question in this whole research group that we can kind of learn in dialogues and in discussing these things, maybe doing a little handicraft. We have had that kind of workshops also, that some of us have given a little task to all of us, and then we can kind of at the same time make it and discuss this. Yes. Perhaps this was not the perfect possible answer, but yes. Thank you.
Kiitos, Sanna. We will take a question from Sarah Green. She asks, she says, "A wonderful and very evocative talk. Thank you. About the critical issues, does the research include differences within the Sami groups? Presumably, not everyone agrees what is the right way to go."
Yes, there was some kind of connection problem, just Pirjo, but if I heard right, so was it like, does there exist different kinds of?
Yeah, I will repeat it. So it's about the diversity within the Sami society, and there are of course different language groups and so forth. So how do you see this diversity, and if everyone agrees?
Yes, of course there are diversity, and this way that we are now doing is one way. I have in my research career, I have had many kinds of approaches, and there are many kinds of discussions going on all the time in the Sami society and in the Sami research field as well. And we have tried to have this kind of a diversity in our team, that we have also like Inari Sami, Anar Sami participant in this group, so that we can also have perspectives from there, and also perhaps contribute opening that Sami minorities questions.
There was one question also asked through WUFA, and relating to the talk yesterday. But thinking of yesterday's talk about slow activism, how does your work relate to this? Asked by Beat Binder.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I was not able to hear yesterday's speeches, as I was in a show jumping competition yesterday, but slow activism. So I'm not sure what is referred to that, but I think as Sami research and indigenous research more widely has kind of started also from this kind of activist work or political work, and there have been this kind of making the society better and fighting for the rights have been very central for Sami research, and still is And we have also in our group, we have also people who may call them activists. So it's difficult to answer, as I'm not sure what was referred by the slow activism, but I think it is present in many ways in our work. The main, as I mentioned in my speech, one of the main objectives of Sami research is to strengthen the Sami self-determination and strengthen the society, and also develop this. I think important goal for us and for me is also to develop this Sami academia, this academic field of Sami research within the university system, and in a way that it is all the time has lively interaction with the communities, so that it's not kind of a ivory tower playing here.
Okay, thank you so much. I see that we're running out of time, so unfortunately we have to end this discussion already. There are a few unanswered questions in the chat, in the Q&A box that you can see, Sanna. Also a lot of positive comments, and thank you to your talk. So you can have a look at that and see if you have time to react on that. But I also want to thank you all of you too. That was a really great contribution to the conference. Thank you all attendees for all your reactions and questions. I wish you a nice conference.
Thank you, everyone. We continue at 2:00 with the panels. Thank you, Sanna, so much.
Ollut kiitos.